generally speaking, what would be one of the main things that you think you wanted to improve upon coming out of Warhammer 1? Was there something you didn't quite have time to get to, but you're most proud of that you got to in Warhammer 2?
I mean, one of the big things that we're really pushing with 2 is the vortex and the ritual mechanics. One of the kind of problems that mechanic is specifically trying to solve is the problem of the late game of Total War. So in kind of most of our previous games, when you get quite late in a campaign, you've kind of won. You know, you own half of the map.
Even if you haven't necessarily completed your objectives, you're so big that you can't lose.
No one can really stop you. Even if someone is quite big in size, they're not really going to do any real damage to you to be able to stop you just kind of steamrolling. It's just a case of time of just trudging through and getting to that end. So that's one thing we really wanted to tackle. So the Vortex and the ritual mechanics in Warhammer 2 in the Warhammer 2 Vortex campaign is all about this race that the 4 main races are performing against each other. And I kind of like to think of it as like a wacky races kind of thing. It's all very sabotaging one another, trying to go along this race to perform what that race wants to do to the vortex. And it means that even late in the campaign, you can still lose if the other races overtake you and complete their victory conditions. So it means there's a lot more tension throughout the whole extent of the campaign. But we were really careful with this to make sure that we don't make it so that is one linear route to victory. We don't want that to be the case. Total War is a sandbox, and making sure it remains a sandbox is really important to us. So if you want to kind of ignore that storyline, ignore that kind of race and just go capturing territory and getting big like you would normally, that's still a totally valid route to go down. So I think that's definitely one of the big things that we wanted to bring and address going into Warhammer 2.
It's how you accrue the ritual currency that you need to cast the rituals to kind of get to those points in the race. How you actually accrue that ritual currency is also kind of very sandboxy, because you can do it through various things, through special buildings, through casting minor rites, through narrative missions, as well as capturing territory as well. So there's lots of different paths to actually tread upon this narrative.
Does it kind of draw on elements from the past Total War games, like where we had Attila, like kind of a big end boss, or Shogun 2 Realm Divide? Once you get too much territory, does it kind of pick and choose and like part of those little mechanics build into this big vortex? Like, have you applied lessons learned from previous endgame scenarios to this one?
Yeah, I mean, we always look back at our previous games and mechanics there and try and find what worked and what didn't. There is an ending of sorts to the campaign. I don't want to kind of spoil too much of it now, but it is not a Realm Divide kind of thing. It's something different, something new that we wanted to try. So yeah, I kind of don't want to say too much about that right now. I want people to experience that.
But it is a kind of discrete win point that you get to. You know, if you conquer all the challenges that the vortex mechanic and the ritual mechanics lead up to, and you win, that's a distinct kind of end point. And it's, you know, as Sam has hinted at, it's quite a big ending. And that is also something you can lose, and that's a thing that creates tension during the course of the campaign as you're working through the steps you need to get to ultimately control the vortex, whether that's in a kind of positive or negative way according to your race. That's very much the end point you need to get to. So
there's also 4 narrative strands going on kind of at the same time. Each of the races has their own story behind what's going on. It's not a shared, you know, like the Chaos Invasion. It's each faction has different thing going on that's leading them through these vortex rituals.
So we've got some movies that you'll see when you at certain points in the campaign. So we are really kind of again hitting that kind of hard narrative. So
and very race specific as well.
They are.
Like the rituals themselves are race specific. You have to do different stuff, which is all pulled from the lore, you know, and designed around their particular race history and characteristics.
I think going back to your original question, that is one area we wanted to improve upon. Just there's so much lore in the fantasy world of Warhammer, like so much, and we just want to pull as much of that forward into the game while making it not inaccessible to people that don't know that lore already. So I think that's something we're really trying to push forward.
Cool, thanks.
So Magic is obviously a new implementation. Total War Warhammer. It played a gigantic role in the first game, and I would assume in the second game it's going to play an even bigger role. The High Elves, Dark Elves, and Lizardmen especially are some of the most magically adept races in all of Warhammer Fantasy. So I was wondering, what is CA doing to improve upon the Magic system from the first game and to demonstrate the power of casters like Lord Mazdamundi or Lord Teclis? How are they going to be implemented and differentiate themselves from casters that were in the first game?
Spell selection's definitely going to mark out Mazdamundi and Teclis, because even in the tabletop they've got kind of special, unique spells to them. Thinking of like Ruination of Cities for Mazdamundi, and Teclis, as you know, can take from different spell laws. I'm not sure we've implemented that exactly like that, but there's definitely going to be a flavour of that. And also, as you probably saw in the spell effects, we're really hitting them hard this time, making them really cool and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're very, very powerful casters. Their skill trees give them a lot of options in terms of the different spells that they can have and the different effects that they can get. For instance, I believe Teclis has access to all of the different lore attributes for all of the laws of the magic spells. So through means like that, we can make them a lot more powerful, but also give players the ability to customize within the skill tree the way that they want that caster to work. So it means that there's lots of routes that you can take someone like Teclis down. So that's an interesting new thing, actually, rites. So rites are minor rituals that you can spend currency, and that currency you spend is different between different factions on performing these rites, and they give you large reaching effects. So for example, there is unlocking of army abilities. The Lizardmen use it as a mechanic for awakening Slar to bring them into the recruitment pool. I think as the Lizardmen, you can use it to spawn a feral beast army to call upon your time of need. So it's a really cool way of us giving the player access to these kind of like emergency call buttons where it's like, okay, I'm about to fight this battle, I need this thing right now, and if you've got the money to spend, you can get that, and it just really adds to the gameplay.
Cool. So back to like going from Warhammer 1 to Warhammer 2, improvements or additions. So I guess we've covered generally the campaign is now structured around this new endgame mechanic and it kind of drives your story. We touched on magic, largely the same fundamentals, but you're adding kind of a new thing superimposed which deals with the armies and rights. I guess the next thing I wanted to talk about would be lords. I think you guys mentioned briefly that the lords are going to function a little bit differently. How are you tackling lords and heroes differently in this next iteration of the title?
So, well, with the High Elves, for example, they you get different grades of Lord. You get different quality levels of Lord. Now they build up. High Elves build up influence over time. There's certain actions you can perform, which will gain you influence, and that can be spent on courting the more prestigious and powerful lords to your side. So certain lords to start with, you just won't be able to access. You just won't be able to win them to join. Even if they're in the pool, you won't be able to get hold of them unless your influence is high enough. So, and you mentioned with the Slan as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's
awakening
the Slan.
Do you mean generic lords, or do you mean specialized named lord characters like Teclis or
Generic lords.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll just be
So like a
different
high elf
quality
prince
levels.
you might not have access to at the
Exactly.
beginning, but as
Exactly.
you work through the campaign,
Yeah,
you'll be able to get one.
But that influence that you're accruing, you can also use that in diplomacy to kind of play factions off against each other. So if you've got two enemies but they're actually allies of one another, and you want those guys to fight so that they weaken each other, and essentially your two enemies become weaker, you can use your influence to lower their diplomatic relations with one another to the point that they then engage in battle. So, and you can make people like you can make people like each other. There's so much you can do in terms of playing around and pulling the strings of the diplomacy of all of the factions that you are in relations with. And that's strengthened with the High Elf's ability to spy on the territory of anyone that they're trading with. So that's a really cool mechanic where if you manage to get a trade agreement with other people, and again, you may want to strengthen your relationship to get that trade agreement, to then be able to spy on their territory and see everything that's going on. The high elves are very, manipulative, looking at the world. They don't need the money. They just want to see what's going on.
I think what I really like about it is because the high elves are often obviously seen as the good guys, and actually they're quite political creatures, and it's the whole intrigue at court thing. In fact, intrigue at court dilemmas is part of it as well. So when you're playing high elves, you're going to get some interesting kind of very political dilemmas that may win or lose you influence and stuff like that. And like we say, we can then use the influence in other places. So the high elves aren't just going to be this straight cut kind of empire-like. It's a standard role. They're definitely their own character as well.
Yeah. And so it's interesting how that carries through onto the campaign map, because if you think of Ulthuan as inner circle and outer circle, and you've got this mountain pass, these fortress gates block the inner and outer circle, and you physically cannot get from the inner to the outer if you don't own that fortress gate. So having control of those is actually really important, because then you can get your troops in and out of Ulthuan. Otherwise, you're blocked from being able to get through.
How do they play differently than the sieges that are in Warhammer 1? Is it pretty much the same kind of game type, or is it substantially different, and how so?
It's very similar gameplay, but with some of the new siege maps offering more inner city fighting.
Okay.
So does it function on the campaign map more like a structure that you can garrison and upgrade?
It's a settlement.
Oh, it's a settlement in
Yes.
itself. Okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't generate income, or
It's a settlement
It's
in
straight
all
up
ways
settlement.
that it's
Gotcha.
a settlement.
It's got
Exactly.
building slots and
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess
We didn't talk about GEOMANTIC Web. Is that
No.
worth touching
Yeah.
on? So GEOMANTIC Web is one of the main factional features for Lisman. So I'll go to the lore expert first for an explanation of the
Well, we've got
GEOMANTIC
milk and
Web.
cookies here. The Geomantic Web, so it's basically a lattice of power that the Slan effectively sit in their star chambers at the top of the ziggurats and talk to each other by. As we enter the Vortex campaign, it's kind of fallen into disrepair due to there's something spoilery that's happened to the Vortex. And so part of your campaign gameplay is building up and aligning the geomantic web. So the more kind of temple cities you own, the more you can build that power up and build that. Connect them up like a big kind of line diagram.
So you want to build up your cities where two ley lines connect, and if the power between them is based upon the lowest level, so if you have a level 3 and a level 2, that's a level 2 power, and that means that the commandments being issued in both of those settlements will perform at a level 2 rank. So you want to try and get your cities to a higher level, connect the ones that connect and get them higher so you can perform more powerful commandments. So there's lots of interesting
Tying
gameplay
it to
and
the
trying to work out,
commandment
okay,
system,
I've got
really
this
strategy,
city, so therefore I want to connect with this one, so I've got to go and get that one, and then build them up, and fighting against the Lisman player, you want to take out his connections to power him down. So yeah,
It's a totally different way of kind of playing, and again, it's using that kind of asymmetric.
And it gives you
design.
a sort of unusual expansionary choice to make as well, because there's all these ruins. You can rebuild temple cities in those ruins, but this one over here might look like an easy one to grab because it's in a safe point. But are you going to be able to? You've got a big, powerful geomantic web going on over here. Is there kind of any point should you be getting a close one, even though it's harder to get? So you can link it up with the web and instantly, build it up and get access to those high commandments. So it gives you some interesting choices to make about where you're going. So.
yeah.
How does it work in? I can't believe I'm asking you this. How does it work in co-op with the geomantic web if you've got two Lizardmen players? That's a good question.
That's a good
That is a very good question.
How does that work?
This is concerning,
Come
guys.
sit over here.
I think each player.
Do you have your own web?
I'll
or
go check.
Get back to you on that one.
Yeah, back to you on that
Sounds
one.
good.
continuing on with the campaign, so we talked macro level, but micro, when we were looking on the campaign map, there's a lot of little things here and there. One of the things I noticed was these cool rogue armies, or I can't remember the exact term.
Yeah, rogue
rogue
armies.
armies was one of them that was awesome, so kind of a return to the rebel armies that you can kind of squash, but this is an interesting take on it. As well as the ruined cities, so lots of little things that are kind of neutral that anyone can interact with, plus a lot of the minor factions that we're going to be seeing here on the Vampire Coast, it seems like there's a lot of like stuff to interact with.
Yeah.
That seems really awesome. But could you tell us more about those two?
Yeah, sure. So rogue armies specifically are kind of, as they sound, these kind of rogue mercenary band armies, and they're built up of they're all sort of searched out of the deep archives of the lore.
Yeah. So there is law precedence for them and everything, and sometimes we just wanted a cool little theme and stuff like that.
But they're really interesting army compositions. So one example is a Beastmaster kind of army with a goblin that commands an army of nothing but beasts, so squigs mixed with boars, mixed with stegodons, and so you're pulling from all the different factions and creating a really interesting thematic battle to fight against. And so these rogue armies come onto the campaign map, and initially they're quite small, and they need to build themselves up before they come out and they go and attack you. So if you can find them early and get rid of them, you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble later on before they build up and come and attack you.
Is it like an emergent faction that can then take over cities, or do they just... Oh, okay.
Yep, they can take over. So so they're really cool. Treasure hunting, do you guys want to touch on that?
Yeah, so you've got, ruins all around the world, and we in Warhammer in previous games, if there's ruins, you can settle them. There's an attached cost to that, but we wanted to kind of bring a bit more gameplay to that. So you've got a choice. You can go and settle it, or you can choose to go treasure hunting, which basically is a kind of risk-reward situation. So some bad things might happen to you when you're delving in the depths of ancient ruins, but also you can find magical items down there. You can find great riches. So there's it's a bit of a roll the dice, see what happens.
Okay, so it is actually kind of random. Otherwise, you'd know. Okay, this one's a trap. That one's a trap.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know until you go in. So if you feel like you've got the manpower to take a hit if something goes south, then it might be fun to do, and you might get something good out of it. So
is that just armies that interact, or can agents kind of go and treasure hunt?
Just armies, isn't it? Yeah. But you've got encounters at sea as well.
Yeah, encounters at sea. So obviously we've got a large part of the map is sea based and everything, and that's not necessarily means it's empty. You're going to have encounters at sea. Again, some flavourful little kind of dilemmas and events that may have with risk-reward situations.
So you might have seen the sunken ship just off the coast of Lustria, just as we got to Lustria. I don't know if you noticed that, and it had a little kind of sparkly VFX around it. So that's one example. You might be sailing across the ocean and find a little island, and you're like, oh, there's something going on there, so you can go.
The whole maps are quite a trove of stuff. There's no just boring empty space. Everything is.
And the thing that's super cool about these kind of new features as well is that they all affect the combined campaign, where if you have Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, you have the combined world together. So if you go back and you play a dwarf campaign, suddenly you're dealing with rogue armies, treasure hunting, encounters at sea. You've got the universal territory capture, so the whole world is capturable with different suitability of regions as to whether they're good for you or bad for you. So going back and playing those factions is a whole new.
It's going to feel very fresh. It's not your Empire campaign between the old world campaign and between the combined campaign is going to feel very different. The world's going to feel,
and even just all the small things that we're doing, like UI improvements and everything like that, all makes those campaigns just better to go back and play.
But that's only if you own 1 and 2.
Correct.
But if you just own 1, that's not on the menu right now.
That's right.
But for an Empire player like me, it's really exciting to go, right, working in Adolf, I'm just going to pop across the sea and try have a go at taking Lustria now.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So for getting to one world to the other, is there going to be like some naval, like how exactly is that going to work? Is there a way to like blockade other, like trying to get, preventing?
So just traveling across the sea.
Yeah.
Traveling across the sea is transport ship kind of gameplay and auto resolve with 2 ships coming to contact.
Okay.
Yeah, we've definitely chosen to focus our efforts on land battles and where Warhammer's strength really is. But that's not to mean that the sea gameplay is devoid. There's, as we mentioned, the encounters at sea. There's storms that roam around on the oceans. They move between turns around randomly to varying strengths, so you've got to watch out for where they're going to be. There's reefs and maelstroms at sea, which are areas that will damage you. You've got to watch out for.
There's also a certain race that's really good in the sea, but I can't say any more about that at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So it's more about like planning and just like you can set up this huge army, but if you don't plan ahead, then you can lose them to disaster.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.
You're welcome.